Good afternoon, I'm Jadam-san. Welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be talking about the most underrated building in EU5. We hear a lot about some of the really strong buffs you can get for your nobility buildings, your clergy buildings, and especially your burgher buildings, as they form the basis of your economy, a lot of your tax base. But what we don't really hear is how strong a random building in your peasantry can be as well. And that is obviously the market village. So why are they so strong? Well, market villages are a relatively cheap building in your peasantry that can be made in rural settlements. There's not many options for this type of building, so you're not really competing for this peasantry pool with other key buildings, and you're highly likely going to fill this building very fast, rather than having to wait for skills or people shortages. That can often happen if you build too many burger buildings, for example. It also only requires 0.25 masonry in comparison to a usual building's 0.5. This means that when you're getting your 33% discounted buildings, 33 ducats rather than 50, you can do more before this discount is removed, specifically double the amount. Firstly, they give you plus 100 labourers and plus 50 soldiers. This is brilliant, as it means that if you're expanding your RGOs, you've got a bigger pool of base labourers to expand to fill your job postings quickly and get yourself up to a productive capacity. You're also doing this with soldiers as well, so for example, if you're spamming out bailiffs or forts, you will fill these buildings much quicker and you'll get them up to standard. It's also important to note that these pops promote much faster than just your base peasants. As you can see, your base peasants have a 50% promotion speed, whereas soldiers have a 100% speed, so double what your peasants have, and your labourers have 150%, so 3 times as fast as what your peasants have. This is a really important modifier to note of, especially if you've got shortages in your burghers, which can happen when you're rapidly industrialising. Obviously, this does come with the debuff of increasing your peasantry power. However, this isn't that bad, as it will increase their spending power, and it will also decrease your nobility's power through diluting the pool. And as I'm sure you know, in EU5, your estate's power is what you really have to be grappling with. So you only get real debuffs if your political power of your peasantry goes above 25%, and especially in the early game, you don't have to be worrying about this. Your market villages also give you food capacity, and a sizable amount in 50. When you've got to think a granary only gives you 200. So why is this important? Well, obviously, it increases the amount of time you've got to adapt your province before it starves if you do go into a food negative. But also, it indirectly increases your yearly population growth through that large food storage in province modifier. And just to tackle a little misconception, that large food storage in province modifier doesn't mean it's got a granary. Sure, it indirectly does, but it's not just because of that. It's because of your total food storage in that province. If you're looking for a full guide on population growth and population capacity, please check the recent population guide video I published. I'll link it in the top right now. So back to the video. This modifier is calculated by up to 10 years of food storage in your province. For example, in this province, we have 30 consumption here, 31 here, 27 here, and 33. That's 122 food consumption in terms of your total province. Whereas our food stockpile in this province, our total storage is 200. So if magically all of our food production in this province stopped, we'd have only about a month and a half of food before we went into starvation. You gain 0.03% yearly population growth per 12 months of food storage in a province. This means that if we got our granary size to near enough 400, so 4 market villages, we would get an additional 0.01 population growth in this province. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but it does add up, especially over the course of the game. And finally, they also give trade advantage and trade capacity. This is huge, as in your market, your trade advantage essentially determines what goods you can trade out of your market and what goods you can import into it. And your capacity obviously means the amount of trades you can do. And often, the more trades you can do, the more money you're raking in for both you and your estates. And just going off topic for a second, this is why it's so important to raise your crown power. Because not only does your crown power represent the proportion of your trade income that you get per month, but also how easy it is to revoke privileges from your estates that are preventing you from increasing your crown power further, such as the nobles. If you can increase your crown power, you can reduce the cost of essentially the stability hit for taking their privileges away, and their privileges are what is essentially giving them their huge stranglehold over our nation. What is also brilliant is that your peasants are really easy to tax in EU5. especially if you progress further down to your traditional economy and your serfdom. As you can see straight at the game, our peasant tax slider is much higher than our other estates. So investing into our populace and giving them jobs and skilled employment that then pushes more cash back into their estate not only is brilliant for us because we're raking in more tax income, but also you're pushing more money straight into your peasant estate and they produce brilliant buildings for your country. Unlike someone like your nobles, where all they want to do is build toll castles and increase their own influence, or your clergy, when there's a high probability they're doing the same sort of thing. Finally, they're also really strong just because of the production methods that they have access to. Jewelry is a brilliant example for this, because right at the start of the game, you're often going to have a shortage of jewelry. Now, for some nations, this can be brilliant, because if you're playing somewhere like Bohemia, where you've got ample silver and gold, you can quickly start a jewelry farm to your neighbouring countries and profit because of it. But if you're in a market, say Muscovy, where you don't have access to any jewelry, you can't import it from Hungary, Poland, or from Serbia, because you don't have enough trade range or trade advantage in their markets. So there's no way really for you to get that silver and gold that you need to ease your deficits and start minting, let alone even make jewelry. Whereas using the rural jewelry, you can make it straight away from stone, something that all nations have access to. You don't need these fancy materials, and you can do it cheaply and fill your deficits. The Glass Guild is also a perfect example for this as well. Using the market village, you can make 0.3 glass from 1 sand. Now, sand is a really cheap resource that's often in huge supply on these markets. Whereas if you do a glass guild for your burger buildings, you're going to be adding tools and wood to the production process. This can make it less efficient if you don't have a surplus of tools and wood in your market and less demand for glass. So once again, you can fill your deficits at really low cost without much effort. And the beauty of EU5 is you can just automate your different market villages to choose the production process that supports your market as best as possible. So you don't have to micromanage these, albeit you can find little pockets of gold if you do micromanage these, and you can really min-max your market. The beauty of EU5 is that you can play exactly how you want to. We're in the middle of an AI revolution, so if you really want to automate your entire nation, or at least your market and your buildings, you can do that. But if you want to take it really competitively, you want to min-max as much as you can, and you want to get the best advantage you can, I would recommend taking it off automation, focusing as much as you can, and checking up on good EU5 content, so you can learn and understand this game as much as everyone else. Finally, for those still here, a little unknown mechanic is that if you build a market village, or any building in fact, in a province where it's got the raw resource that it builds off of, this gets you a 10% productive efficiency modifier just for having the raw resource that relates to your building in that province. This doesn't just go for market villages, but because market villages have so many production processes, it means that you can stack this modifier quite well and utilize it in a lot of your provinces. And where do you want to be building your market villages? Well, you've got to think strategically about your country. If you've got a big capital and you're spamming a lot of buildings in there, especially burger ones, where you're thinking, I might run out of people soon, or especially labourers, you can run out quite easily. If you've got a profitable RGO, something that's maybe better than wine, that you're just maxing out and you're trying to get as many people in there as possible in your high control lands. If you build market villages around there, not only will your labourers migrate into that province, but you'll reap more of that resource for your market villages' labour because you're in high control provinces. Now, obviously control in EU5 is one of the biggest mechanics. Proximity is dependent on how close you are to your capital. So if you can prioritise making your market villages here, then you'll be profiting more and putting your manpower and your labour where you need it most. It also stops you from counteracting yourself. For example, if you build it down on a coast where you can also get fishing villages, and these are equally strong because not only do they increase your trade capacity more, but they increase your harbour capacity, which directly leads to an increase in maritime presence, which this also gives. And maritime presence is directly how you get control over sea zones. And for a nation such as England or Castile, it's so important. So by making it inland near your capital, if your capital chooses to still be here, obviously in most Castile games you're going to move into the south, is the correct choice. And just plan it out and figure out where you want to go in your game, because every game is different and every strategy can be different or optimized in some shape or form. While you're here, please consider subscribing. I'm still new to this, but I've got a lot of knowledge to dispel, and if you've learned something, please let us know. Also, if you've got any tips that you'd like to share to other newbies, please share them in the comments. We're all learning this game together, so any help you can provide would be brilliant.